Hey there, dear learner. I'm so glad you're here. If you're new, hit subscribe and stay with me. This is Learn English Through Story. Watch until the end to see what happens, because tonight begins with thunder, a missing letter, and a promise that refuses to die. Maya stood under the bus shelter with a paper bag pressed to her chest. Inside the bag, a tiny music box and a folded note she had written 10 times and ruined 9. She was 28. An engineer who once solved problems like puzzles, but lately every puzzle felt like a wall. The rain turned the street into a mirror, and the city's lights shivered in it like nervous stars. The last bus would come at 11:11. It was a small rule she believed in. When the numbers matched, beginnings did too. She intended to visit her father, first time in a year, and return something that had broken between them. The music box was an apology wrapped in gears. A thin man played violin at the corner, the bow trembling. The melody was soft, a door opening in the dark. Maya gave him her last coin. He nodded, eyes thanking her more than his voice could. "Storm," he said, waving the bow at the sky. "Storm's clean." His accent bent the words gently, like warm metal. She checked the note again. "Not long, not dramatic. Just, I was wrong. I miss you. I'm ready to listen." Simple English. Simple love. But shame is a strong editor, and it kept cutting lines she tried to keep. The argument last year had been about ending. Her father wanted to close a small repair shop. Old radios, alarm clocks, wind-up toys. The same shop where she had learned the language of screws and springs. "Time changes," he had said. "We adapt." She had shouted back that adapting always seemed to mean giving up the things that made them feel real. He called her stubborn. She called him afraid. Then, like poorly tightened bolts, they rattled away in separate directions. The bus groaned up the street, headlights pushing pale tunnels through the rain. Maya's heart stepped faster. She tucked the note into the music box and slipped both into the paper bag. The violinist's song lifted, a thread across water. She was about aboard when lightning stitched the sky, and the power in the whole block blinked out. The bus sighed and stopped, doors half open, its interior dim as a dream. The driver leaned out and shouted, 10 minutes, maybe more." People groaned. Someone laughed. The violin kept playing brave and small. Maya sat back down. 10 more minutes meant 10 more doubts. She touched the paper bag and felt the fragile machine of her apology. Metal teeth, tiny spring, a voice that could sing or stay silent. In the dark, her memories brightened. She saw herself as a child, standing on a stool, watching her father rebuild an old pocket watch. He had placed every piece on a white cloth, explained each one slowly, naming them like friends. "We don't force time," he had said. "We encourage it." A drop of rain slid from the shelter's roof, landed on her hand, and ran between her fingers like quicksilver. She took a breath that tried to be brave. "I'm going," she whispered. The word going felt like a small bird in her mouth, warm and alive. But when the lights returned and the bus doors finally opened wide, the paper bag in Maya's lap felt lighter than before. She looked inside. The music box and the note were gone. The violinist had stopped playing. The corner was suddenly only rain. Her chest hollowed. She stood, dizzy with panic, eyes searching the wet pavement, the bench, the bus step. Nothing. Her apology, the one she had rehearsed for months, had disappeared into the stormy city like a lost hour. She turned to the violinist, but he was nowhere. Only a dark case remained, shut tight, a small silver key taped to its lid. On the key, scratched by a careful hand, was a single word, turn. Little did Maya know, the real challenge was just beginning. The key in Maya's hand was small, almost delicate, yet carried a weight her heart could not explain. The word, turn scratched into its surface, glimmered faintly under the dim streetlight. She looked around again for the violinist, for her missing paper bag, for any trace of how her apology had vanished. But the night gave her only silence, broken by rain dripping from the shelter roof. Her bus hissed impatiently. The driver tapped his watch, eyes narrowed as if to ask, "Are you coming or not?" But Maya couldn't move. Something inside told her the note and the music box had not simply been stolen. They had been taken somewhere she was meant to follow. She picked up the violin case that had been left behind. The silver key slid perfectly into its lock. With trembling fingers, she turned it. The click was soft, but the sound sent shivers up her spine. She opened the lid. Inside, there was no violin. Instead, she found an old pocket watch, its glass cracked, its hands frozen at 11:11. Wrapped around the watch was a slip of paper. Her name was written across it in neat block letters, Maya. Her chest tightened. She unfolded the note. It wasn't her handwriting. The words were sharp and careful, like they had been carved rather than written. If you want back what you lost, follow the clock. Time owes you a truth. Her throat went dry. How could someone know about her? About the watch? About time? About her father's shop? For a moment she thought of running, of tossing the watch into the gutter and pretending none of this had happened. But her father's voice echoed inside her. We don't force time. We encourage it. And the cracked watch in her hands ticked louder than fear. She looked at the frozen hands. 11:11. That was when the bus should have carried her home. Instead, she was standing in a storm, holding an object that seemed to know her story better than she did. The driver honked. Last chance, he called. Maya tightened her grip on the watch. She shook her head and stepped back. The doors closed. The bus rumbled away into the night, leaving her alone with the rain, the key, and the mystery. She whispered into the darkness. All right, I'll follow. The city had changed. Or maybe it was her. The street lamps flickered differently now, throwing shadows that stretched like arms. The violinist's melody seemed to echo faintly from somewhere deeper in the alleys, a thread pulling her forward. She tucked the cracked watch into her pocket and walked. Every corner brought something strange. A shop window displayed clocks, but each one pointed to a different hour. A billboard for an old movie suddenly shifted its letters to form a sentence. Not all time is lost. And a stray dog with one blind I patted beside her for half a block before vanishing without a sound. Maya stopped under a flickering lamp. The cracked watch in her pocket felt warm, as though it were alive. She pulled it out and held it to her ear. At first, silence. Then one faint tick. Then another. The hands shivered and moved forward, slow and deliberate, until they pointed to 11:12. Her heart jumped. The message had said, follow the clock. But where was it leading? And who wanted her to follow? Her fingers curled tighter around the watch as she whispered, What you trying to show me? The second hand began to move, trembling like a compass needle searching for north. It swung, wavered, then pointed firmly down a narrow alley, wet with rain and shadow. She took one breath, then another, and then, clutching the watch, Maya stepped into the alley. The air was colder there, heavy with the smell of rust and old wood. Water dripped steadily from a broken gutter, marking time like a metronome. The alley twisted left, then right, narrowing until she had to brush past walls damp with moss. At the end stood a single wooden door, its paint peeling, its frame crooked. And carved into the door, just above the rusted handle, was the same word scratched into her silver key. Turn. Maya's breath caught. She raised the key. The silver key slid into the door's rusted lock. It resisted at first, stiff from years of silence, then yielded with a groan. Maya's breath fogged the air as she whispered, Here goes. She turned the key. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. What lay beyond was not another dark alley. It was her father's repair shop. Not as it looked when she left it last year, but as it had been long ago, when she was a child. The wooden counter gleamed with polish. Every clock ticked in harmony, and the shelves bowed under the weight of wind-up toys, music boxes, and pocket watches. The smell of machine oil and cedar was so familiar it brought tears to her eyes. And there, behind the counter, stood her father, younger, stronger, not the man she left in anger, but the man from her memories. Sleeves rolled, glasses perched on his nose, focused on a radio with its back unscrewed. Dad, Maya whispered. He didn't look up. He turned the screwdriver gently, humming under his breath the same tune the violinist had played in the street. Her chest tightened. She stepped closer, almost afraid he would vanish if she moved too quickly. Dad. She tried again, louder. This time he looked up. His eyes, warm, curious, met hers. but there was no recognition. "Evening," he said kindly, as though she were just another customer. "What brings you in?" Her knees nearly gave way. She steadied herself on the counter. I lost something," she stammered. "A music box. And a note." "Ah," he said, nodding thoughtfully, as if her words made perfect sense. "Time hides what we are not ready to carry. Sit." He motioned to the stool by the counter. She sat, hands trembling in her lap. The cracked watch grew hot in her pocket. She pulled it out and placed it on the counter. Her father leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Interesting piece," he murmured. "Not broken. Just stuck, like it's waiting for someone." Maya swallowed hard. "It's mine, but I don't understand why it brought me here." Her father smiled gently. "Time always brings us where we need to go." Tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to shout, "You know me, you're my father," but some deeper instinct told her not to break the spell. Instead, she asked softly, "Can you fix it?" He picked up the watch, turning it in his hands. "Maybe, but first you must decide. Do you want it to show you the past or the future?" Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Every broken clock has two choices," he said. "It can remind us of what hurt us, or it can show us what we might still become." The shop grew quieter, as though every clock on the walls had stopped to listen. Maya's heart pounded. She thought of their fight, of the words that had split them apart. She thought of the note she had lost. She thought of how badly she wanted to undo that night, yet also how desperately she wanted to move forward. Her voice shook. "I don't know if I can choose." Her father placed the watch back on the counter. "Then time will choose for you." At once, the watch hand spun violently, faster and faster, a storm of seconds blurring into light. Maya cried out and shielded her eyes. The shop dissolved. When she opened them, she was standing in a hospital corridor. White walls, fluorescent lights, a gurney rolling past. Her father's voice shouting her name, older now, familiar, terrified. Maya froze. What moment in time had the watch chosen? The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, their harsh glow washing everything in pale blue. Maya's shoes squeaked against the polished tiles as she turned, searching for the voice that had called her. "Maya!" Her father's voice, raw, urgent. She spun and saw him, older again, the age she knew him now, not the younger version from the shop. He was rushing down the hall, still wearing the oil-stained jacket he had always refused to throw away. His hair was grayer, his shoulders heavier, his eyes frantic. She couldn't move. Could he really see her? He stopped right in front of her, breathless. "Where were you?" He broke off, staring at her as if confirming she was real. His hands trembled as they gripped her shoulders. I thought I'd lost you." Maya's throat tightened. "Dad." But before she could say more, a nurse pushed past them. "Sir, please. We need the hallway clear." Behind her, a gurney sped by. A woman lay on it, still pale, hooked to wires and beeping machines. For a heart-shattering second, Maya thought it was her, but then she saw the truth. It was her mother. No, not possible. Her mother had died when Maya was only 12. She had held her father's hand at the funeral, had stood by the graveside, had lived years missing the woman who hummed lullabies while repairing torn clothes. Yet here she was, alive but fragile, being rushed through the hospital corridor. Maya stumbled backward, gripping the cracked watch so tightly her palm ached. The second hand spun again, ticking wildly as though feeding on her confusion. Her father didn't notice. His eyes were locked on the gurney. He whispered her mother's name, his voice breaking like thin glass. "Elena," he moved to follow, but the nurse blocked him gently. "Please wait here, sir. They'll update you." He leaned against the wall, hand covering his mouth, shaking. Maya felt her own knees weaken. She pressed the watch to her chest, heart racing. "This can't be real," she muttered. "It's not real, it's memory." But if it was memory, then why was she here inside it? Why could she feel the chill of the hospital air, smell the sharp antiseptic, hear the murmur of voices down the hall? Her father sank onto a plastic chair, head in his hands. He looked so small, so vulnerable, Maya wanted to go to him, to kneel and whisper, "I'm sorry, Dad. I should never have left. I should have come back sooner." Her legs carried her toward him. She reached out, and her hand passed through his shoulder. She gasped, stumbling back. Her father didn't react. He couldn't feel her. This wasn't now. It wasn't her present. It was his past. The watch pulsed in her hand, and suddenly she understood. It wasn't just showing her time. It was making her witness it, forcing her to see what she had never seen. Her father had lived this moment alone, without her. She had been 12, too young to notice the full weight of his grief. But here, she saw it, the crushing loss, the way it broke him, the reason he clung so fiercely to his repair shop. It wasn't just about clocks or radios. It was about holding on to pieces of her mother, the world they had built together. Maya pressed her fist to her eyes. Tears burned hot. "Dad, I didn't know." The corridor blurred. The beeping machines faded. The air shifted, heavy then light. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the hospital. She stood in her father's shop again, but different now. Dust covered the counters. Clocks hung lifeless on the walls. The place looked abandoned, forgotten. And in the middle of the shop, sitting on the old wooden stool, was her father, older than ever, his back bent, his hair thin. In his lap rested the music box she had meant to return to him. He turned the crank slowly, but no melody came, only silence. The cracked watch ticked in her palm. Its hands pointed forward. 11:15. Time was moving, dragging her deeper. She realized with a cold shiver. It wasn't just showing her the past. It was showing her what awaited if she never found her apology. Her father, alone. The shop silent. The music box, broken forever. Her chest heaved. No, that's not how it ends. The watch ticked louder, like a heartbeat, as though daring her to change the story before it was too late. But how could she fight against time itself? The silence in the abandoned shop pressed against Maya's ears, thick and merciless. Her father sat motionless on the stool, winding the music box over and over, refusing to accept that it would not sing. His eyes were hollow, distant. He looked not at the music box, but through it into a space Maya couldn't reach. "No," she whispered again, louder this time. "That's not the truth. That's not who you are." The cracked watch burned against her palm. She lifted it to her ear. Instead of steady ticking, she heard something new. Faint whispers, like voices buried inside the mechanism. They weren't words she could fully understand, but they felt familiar, like echoes of her own thoughts. One thread among them stood out, clear and sharp. "Turn." Her fingers shook as she pressed the crown of the watch. The hand spun violently, then stopped at 11:16. At once, the dead clocks on the shop's walls jolted. One by one, pendulums began to sway. Gears clicked. Springs tightened. The room filled with storm of sound. Ticks, tocks, chimes, all waking at once. Her father stirred. He looked up, startled, eyes darting around the shop. The silence that had crushed him for so long was gone, replaced by a symphony of time. The music box in his lap gave a faint mechanical cough. He turned its crank again. This time, one trembling note escaped. "Weak but alive." Maya's heart leapt. "Yes, keep turning." Her father couldn't hear her, but he obeyed anyway, as if guided by something unseen. Another note, then another, slowly. The music box began to sing again, though its melody was fractured, like memories stitched together with trembling hands. Maya clutched the watch tighter. If he can bring it back, maybe I can too. The whispering inside the watch grew louder, and suddenly she saw flashes. Her father teaching her to repair a pocket watch when she was 9. Her mother humming while dusting the shelves. Herself storming out after their fight, slamming the shop door hard enough to rattle every clock. The images stabbed, but they also connected, like gears locking into place. She pressed the crown again. The hands jumped forward. 11:17. The shop changed. Dust dissolved. Light filled the windows. The shelves were whole again, crowded with ticking, glowing timepieces. Her father still sat on the stool, but now he looked stronger. his face lit by the soft glow of hundreds of working clocks. But something else caught her eye. On the counter, right where she used to leave her school bag, rested a paper bag. Her paper bag. The one she had lost at the bus stop. Her breath caught. She ran to it, tore it open. Inside was a music box and the folded note she had written. But the note was no longer folded. It lay open, its words written in glowing ink as if burning from within. The sentences pulsed with light. I was wrong. I miss you. I'm ready to listen. Maya's throat tightened. She grabbed the note, holding it close to her chest. This is it. This is what I came for. Her father looked up from the stool. For the first time, his eyes met hers directly. Not past her, not through her, but at her. Maya, he whispered. His voice was soft, uncertain, like he was testing the shape of her name after years of silence. Her heart thundered. You see me? He nodded slowly, rising to his feet. The music box in his hand glowed faintly, matching the light from the note she held. The shop trembled, as if it could not hold the weight of this reunion. Clocks ticked faster. Pendulums swung wildly. The hands of every clock spun in unison, racing toward midnight. Her father stepped closer. Time doesn't break, Maya. It waits. The watch in her palm grew unbearably hot. Its glass cracked wider, a fracture spilling light across the room. She realized it was forcing her toward a choice. Either step forward, given the note, and seal the apology, or lose it all again as the clock spun out of control. Her knees trembled. Her hand shook. She raised the note. And just as she did, the watch exploded in light, dragging her somewhere new. She staggered, blinded. When her vision cleared, she was no longer in the shop. She was back at the bus stop. The rain had stopped. The bus driver leaned out, annoyed. Miss? You getting in or not? The paper bag was in her lap, dry, whole, untouched. Inside, the music box and the note waited, as if none of it had ever happened. But her father's voice still echoed in her head. Time doesn't break. It waits. And she knew this was not just another chance. It was the last one. Maya blinked hard. The paper bag felt solid in her lap, her note and the music box inside untouched, but nothing else felt unchanged. The night air was too still, the street too quiet. The driver's voice, sharp, impatient, hung strangely in her ears. She stood, clutching the bag, and stepped onto the bus. Immediately, she knew something was wrong. The bus was nearly empty, only a handful of passengers scattered in the seats. But each one of them seemed out of time. At the back sat a boy of about 12, nose buried in a comic book Maya remembered owning as a child. Across the aisle, a young woman tapped nervously a phone, so old it still had physical buttons. Near the front, an old man polished a silver pocket watch, identical to the one her father had once shown her how to repair. Maya's stomach tightened. These weren't strangers. They were fragments, moment of her own life, or lives tangled with hers. The bus jerked into motion. The lights above flickered, washing the passengers in ghostly light. Ticket! The driver grunted without looking at her. Maya froze. She didn't have one. She reached instinctively for her pocket and found the cracked watch glowing faintly against her palm. The driver glanced at it, gave a small nod, and gestured her toward the seats. So the watch was her fare. She moved down the aisle, heart pounding. The boy with the comic looked up at her. Her eyes, stared back. He smiled shyly. Don't stop learning, he whispered, voice faint but certain. Then he returned to his book. The young woman with the phone glanced up next. Her hands trembled. Say it, she urged. Say the words before they're too late. Maya's throat went dry. These weren't just fragments. They were messages, warnings. She reached the old man. He polished the pocket watch until it gleamed. Without looking up, he said, Every repair begins with patience, not with force. His voice was almost identical to her father's, only thinner, weaker. Maya clutched the bag to her chest. What am I supposed to do? The bus jolted hard around a corner. The lights went out for a second, plunging everything into darkness. When they flickered back, the seats were empty, every passenger gone. Only Maya remained. The driver's voice floated back, strange and hollow. End of the line. She stumbled forward. Where were we going? The driver didn't answer. The bus slowed, brakes squealing. Outside the fog windows, she could see nothing, just a blank stretch of darkness. As if the world itself had ended, the doors hissed open. Her pulse hammered. She stepped out. Her feet touched wooden planks. She blinked. It wasn't a street at all. It was a pier stretching out over endless black water. The air smelled of salt and storm. The bus behind her was gone. Only the cracked watch glowed faintly in her palm. At the end of the pier stood her father. Not young, not old, not broken. Oh, waiting. He turned slowly as she approached, his face unreadable. In his hands, he held the music box, her music box, already wound, ready to play. Maya's chest ached. She opened the bag, pulled out her note, and clutched it so tightly her knuckles whitened. I'm sorry, she whispered. The wind carried her words to him. His expression softened. He lifted the crank and turned it. The music box began to sing. This time the melody was full, steady, rich, the same lullaby her mother used to hum when the world felt safe. Maya unfolded the note, stepped closer, and held it out with both hands. I should have given this to you long ago. Her father's eyes glistened. He reached out slowly, carefully, and took the note. He read the words. And then, for the first time in years, he smiled. The cracked watch in her palm let out one final, perfect tick, its hands aligned to midnight. And then the pier, the water, the storm, all of it dissolved in a flood of light. Maya gasped and found herself standing at her father's real doorstep, the paper bag in her arms, the rain gone. The shop's lights glowed warmly from inside. She could hear faint humming. Her chance was here. But would she have the courage to finally open the door? The wooden door of her father's shop stood only a few feet away, yet to Maya it felt like the length of a lifetime. She clutched the paper bag to her chest, her knuckles white, her breath uneven. Inside, the note and the music box waited, heavier than stone, lighter than forgiveness. From inside came the faintest sound, a humming voice, her father's, low and steady. He was repairing something, just as he had always done. The melody threaded to the crack beneath the door, wrapping around her heart like a rope pulling her closer. Her hand hovered over the handle. She had imagined this moment so many times, rehearsed the words, practiced her tone, begged herself not to cry. Yet standing there, she realized nothing could prepare her. She remembered the hospital corridor, the empty shop, the pier over Blackwater. All the versions of her father time had forced her to witness, grieving, broken, patient, waiting. And she remembered his voice. Time doesn't break. It waits. Maya swallowed hard. Not anymore, she whispered. It doesn't wait forever. She opened the door. The familiar smell of cedar and machine oil washed over her. The shop was smaller than her memory made it, but warmer, softer. Every clock ticked in harmony, 100 tiny voices rising and falling together. Behind the counter sat her father, not younger, not broken, just himself. His shoulders stooped a little more than before, his hands slower, but his eyes, when they lifted and met hers, were still sharp, still alive. Maya, he said, almost too softly to hear. Her chest cracked open. Tears spilled. She set the paper bag on the counter and pushed it gently toward him. I should have come sooner, she said, her voice breaking. I should have said this a year ago. I was wrong. I'm sorry. And I'm ready to listen now. Her father stared at the bag, then at her. His hand trembled as he pulled the music box out. For a long moment he said nothing, only traced the edge of the box with his thumb, as if reacquainting himself with an old friend. Finally, he cranked the handle. The melody spilled out pure and steady, filling the shop with sound. Maya covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing. Her father's lips curved into the smallest smile. You remembered, he murmured. She nodded fiercely. I never forgot. He set the music box aside and reached across the counter. His rough hand covered hers. You're stubborn, he said with the faintest chuckle. Always were. Like your mother. His eyes softened and his voice dropped. But I'm glad you came back. The words broke her. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his hand. Crying into the warmth she thought she had lost forever. The clocks around them ticked louder, as if cheering, as if sealing the moment. For the first time in years, silence between them wasn't a wall. It was peace. But even in peace, shadows lingered. The cracked watch in Maya's pocket vibrated, a faint, insistent tremor. She pulled it out. Its hand spun violently, faster and faster, the glass shattering in her palm. Her father frowned. "What is that?" Maya's stomach twisted. The watch had led her here, through memory and fear, through loss and hope. But it wasn't finished. The violent spinning grew louder, echoing through the shop like thunder. The clocks on the walls faltered, their ticking uneven, breaking rhythm. One by one, they began to stop. "No," Maya whispered. "Not now. Please." Her father's grip tightened on her hand. "Maya, what's happening?" The watch let out a sharp crack. The world around them shook. The shop's walls blurred, bending inward, warping like melting glass. Maya realized with a cold surge of dread. The apology had been given, but time wasn't done with her yet. It wanted more. The shop shook like a fragile machine on the edge of collapse. The walls pulsed with light. The clocks on the shelves froze mid-tick, their pendulums stiff, as if time itself had taken a deep breath and refused to exhale. The cracked watch in Maya's palm spun with such violence it cut into her skin. Her father held her hand tightly. "Maya, let it go." "I can't," she shouted over the growing hum. The watch wasn't just an object anymore. It was a heart beating too fast, a storm trapped in glass. If she dropped it, she feared everything she had fought for would vanish. The apology, the reunion, the fragile thread binding her to him again. The light thickened until the shop dissolved around them. In its place stretched a void, endless and white, a space between moments. Her father was still there, his hand clutching hers, the music box glowing faintly on the counter that no longer existed. The watch shuddered. Its crown rotated by itself. She heard the word again, carved deep into her memory. Turn. She closed her eyes. "If I turn it, what happens?" Her father's voice, soft but firm, reached her through the trembling void. "You've seen what happens when you don't. Trust time. Trust yourself." Her breath quivered. She pressed her thumb against the crown and turned. Click. The watch fell silent. Its hands aligned perfectly to 12. Midnight. For a moment, there was nothing, just silence, so vast it seemed she had erased the universe. Then came the sound of a clock striking. One note, then another. 100 bells chiming together, not chaotic but harmonious, filling the void with music she felt in her bones. The fractured lullaby from the music box blended with it, whole at last. Light spilled outward. Shapes returned. The shop rebuilt itself, not dusty or broken, but alive. Full shelves, polished counters, clocks all ticking in perfect rhythm. The smell of cedar and machine oil returned, sharper, cleaner. Maya gasped. The watch in her hand dissolved into golden dust, scattering into the air. Her father stood before her, steady, strong, his eyes on hers. "It's finished," he said gently. "Time isn't our enemy, Maya. It only waits for us to be ready." Her tears fell freely. She threw her arms around him. For the first time in years, he held her without hesitation. The embrace was clumsy, warm, real. The music box on the counter played by itself. No crank needed. The melody filled every corner of the shop. It wasn't just a song. It was a promise, woven into gears and springs, that some things don't break. They pause. They wait. They return. When at last she stepped back, her father wiped her cheek with his thumb. "You're home," he said simply. Maya nodded, unable to speak. She looked at the music box, then at the shop alive again, then at the door that now felt like an entrance, not an exit. And in her chest, where the cracked watch had once pressed, she felt only peace. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street shimmered in moonlight, and for the first time in a long while, Maya knew time had given her back what she had almost lost. Not because she forced it, but because she turned. "Thank you, my dear friend, for staying with me until the very end of this story. I hope Maya's journey reminded you that apologies, forgiveness, and love are not bound by time. They only wait for courage. If this story touched your heart, please remember to subscribe, like, and share so we can keep growing together. Blue Heart. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right. If you had one chance to turn back time, what moment would you choose to change or to relive? Write your answer in the comments. I can't wait to read your thoughts. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in your own story. Crescent Moon.